On This Week in Enterprise Tech, you get a cell tower. T-Mobile does it neutrally. And is your file server spying on you? Try it on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 166, recorded November 13th, 2015. Niara secures file transfer. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Igloo Software. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like. Use blogs, calendars, file sharing, forums, task management, and wikis to work better together with your teams. Sign up now and try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit. And by PagerDuty. PagerDuty decreases alerting noise for IT operations and developers to ensure that the right engineers are notified at the right time. Increase your uptime and sign up for a free 14-day trial at pagerduty.com/twit. Welcome to Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. But of course, I'm not guiding you by myself. I've got my regular cast of characters, my co-host and dear friends, starting with Mr. Brian Chee, the director of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu, Hawaii. He is the geek in paradise. Cheebert, welcome back to the show. What are you doing?
I am scratching my legs desperately because my physical therapist loves tape, and I had to shave my legs, and now it's growing back, and it itches. And Loquacious in the chat room is laughing her head off at me.
That's interesting, Brian. Okay. A man who does not tape his legs is my other co-host, Mr. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Curtis, I take it your legs are smooth already?
My legs, I'm not sure that they're as smooth as my head, but I don't have any itching going on, and I think we're all grateful for that.
I don't think we've ever had a show go off the rails this early, but let's go ahead and jump straight into the blips. Well, guess what? You get a cell tower, and you get a cell tower, and you get a cell tower. If you're a T-Mobile customer with a simple choice plan, you're entitled to your own micro cell tower. This past week, T-Mobile announced that they will be making available a free, with a $25 refundable deposit, mini tower for homes or offices of simple choice customers. These cell spots use a customer's broadband internet connection to deliver fast, strong, consistent signal. While this was previously possible using Wi-Fi calling, T-Mobile cell spots will broadcast not in the 2.4 and 5.8 unlicensed Wi-Fi spectrums, but in T-Mobile's spectrum of frequencies, meaning that you can now get full bars in your former dead zone, and your calls won't be hostage to an unstable Wi-Fi network.
Microsoft builds a Windows 10 file sharing app with Box. Microsoft and Box are teaming up to deliver an application for Windows 10 that will make file sharing across different Windows devices a lot easier. The app will let users access, manage, and collaborate on their Box content across their Windows 10 PCs and tablets. In addition, users can work on Microsoft Office files directly from the app and get updates on changes with the recently updated Windows Notification Center. This news follows an announcement by rival Dropbox earlier this month, which introduced Dropbox Enterprise, a version of its cloud storage service for large organizations. All the companies hope that their businesses can convince enterprise customers to store more files in the cloud. An October IDG report indicated businesses are still struggling with decisions regarding the adoption of on-premise, hybrid, or cloud-based file transfer technologies. 45% of respondents said they allow the users to store sensitive data in the cloud. 43% still do not and will not allow the use of cloud-based applications.
Well, Google Experimental is working on a micro SD vault, and it may change how we handle passwords. Project Vault, designed by Google's ATAP, Advanced Technology and Projects Group, is a secure computer entirely packed onto a micro SD card that can be plugged into any system, whether it's a desktop or mobile phone, and in this experimental package seems to also be able to talk to other devices through a Bluetooth interface. What the secure computing platform could mean is a truly secure and nearly universal way to handle credentials and perhaps even payment information. The sad part is this is currently only experimental, but the promise of making it a whole lot harder to hack credentials can be seen.
This just in, telco is big business. Just maybe not where you think it is. It's no secret that telcos make a tidy profit from their service, and rightfully so for the most part. However, with diminishing subscriber growth and increased costs from infrastructure improvements to deliver the services they've already sold, several telcos have turned to other sources of revenue based on selling your personal information. Verizon, Sprint, Telefonica, and a handful of other telcos have partnered with data management corporations like HP, IBM, and SAP to sell your data to anybody who has the money to pay. By way of example, SAP's Consumer Insight 365 service proudly proclaims in their advertising that they make 14 billion transactions of telecommunication data per day available for analysts. In English, that means that they sell 600 data points per day per user of the 25 million users to whose data they have access. Of course, the telcos get paid for their participation in these data analysis services, which then begs the question, what do the consumers get?
SAP reveals the roadmap for JAM. Seems like everyone is working to collaborate in 2015, and SAP is no different. Most people don't know that the German software giant even has a collaboration platform, even though SAP JAM currently licenses 21.8 million seats. The company wants that number to grow by allowing JAM collaboration to be rolled into sales, HR, IT, and corporate education roles, with many more to come. In many ways, this roadmap for JAM echoes the roadmap SAP has discussed for S/4HANA, a roadmap in which analytics become part of the functionality rolled into line of business applications. One of the features on the JAM roadmap is an embedded analytics dashboard that will allow managers to see insights and trends related to various KPIs and usage statistics far beyond basic page view and time on page metrics.
Well, this 11-year-old girl will create a virtually uncrackable password for you. Truly uncrackable passwords needs to be something you can actually remember, but random enough that brute force cracking systems will take forever to crack. So what's more random than an 11-year-old girl rolling dice? For a measly $2, Niara, a New York sixth grader, will roll the dice for you and run a system designed in 1995 by Arnold G. Reinhold that creates passphrases that might be something like cleft, cam, synod, lacy, YR, walk, which could possibly be remembered as musical clam, wearing lacy underwear, being cooked in a wok, and being very difficult to crack, but not horrible to remember. So if you need to protect nuclear launch codes, perhaps you should fork over $2 for Niara to roll the diceware for you and deliver your password via the U.S. mail on handwritten stationery.
Well, the only certain things in this life are death and taxes and mega mergers. That's right, the biggest buyout of a publicly traded company by a private concern may have run into a bit of a tax problem. The deal for Dell was to purchase EMC for $67 billion, offering a premium of $33.15 a share to EMC shareholders, $24.05 per share in cash, and $19.10 in a tracking stock based on the performance of VMware, which is 81% owned by EMC. The problem lies in the offer of that tracking stock. Section 335 of the U.S. tax code prevents a company from distributing shares in a subsidiary of an acquired company within 2 years of the acquisition as a way to offset the purchase cost of said company without paying tax on the offset charge. Put simply, you can't immediately leverage an acquired company's assets as a way to pay for the acquisition without incurring a tax liability. Dell is hoping that the Internal Revenue Service will see the creation of the tracking stock as a tax-free exchange allowed by Section 351, but if the IRS decides that the deal would be in violation of Section 335, it could add a $9 billion tax liability to the deal, which already has Dell taking on more than $50 billion in debt for the buyout. Well, that does it for the blips. Next, we're going to be jumping into the Enterprise Bytes. Specifically, we want to know if T-Mobile has now violated net neutrality. But before we do that, let's go ahead and thank the first sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, let me ask you something. Do you remember when your corporate internet was new? Yeah, brand spanking new. It had all those cool features. It looked kind of hip, kind of, well, you know, the internet-y. Well, if you're like most corporations, that corporate intranet is probably not looking so good anymore. It did not grow up with the rest of the internet. And what you're left with is a laggy, ugly, really sort of non-intuitive interface that doesn't really give you access to the data you need. Which is why we're happy to have, as a member of the Twiat Riot, Igloo. Now, Igloo is the corporate intranet done right. That's right. A beautiful and intuitive interface isn't very useful if your users can't access it on the devices that they're using, which is what Igloo was based to solve. It's a cloud-based portal that enables you to share files, collaborate on documents, blog updates, coordinate calendars, and manage projects, all from the same attractive and intuitive interface, no matter what device you might be using. It leverages the best part of an intranet, important enterprise-specific data at your fingerprints, and what people have come to expect from social. Igloo gives your users comments, like buttons, and the ability to add content based on permissions with drag-and-drop widgets and a WYSIWYG editor. Now, it's also customizable. Whether you're a large enterprise using SharePoint or a fast-growing business with a hodgepodge of tools and platforms that you've clutched together, you can now create an intranet that matches your brand's look and feel, simplifies how you work, and is accessible on any device. In other words, it just makes you more professional. Now, what about security? Well, how about SSL and 256-bit encryption baked into a variety of access, authentication, and identity modules to ensure that only authorized users have access? I know what you're saying. It's probably really expensive. No, not at all. Igloo offers plans starting as low as $3 per user per month. And unlike other solutions, you get access to Igloo's entire suite of tools, all for one low price. No nickel and diming, no upsell. Our volume pricing is also available for government agencies and companies like Hulu, Inventive Health, American Family Insurance, and IP Switch. Oh, here's what we want you to do. If you're struggling with updating your intranet, if you're struggling with bringing together your employees into one interface, then sign up and try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit. That's igloosoftware.com/twit. And when you sign up through our link, you can get your own Igloo for up to 10 people absolutely free for as long as you want. That's right, risk-free, people. Why not try it out? Why not install it? Why not sign up, have your group for free for the rest of your life, and just see if maybe Igloo is the way that you want to work together. That's igloosoftware.com/twit. And we thank Igloo Software for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's go ahead and jump into the bites. Now, T-Mobile was already in our blips because they had that very interesting mode where they offered us microcells, femtocells, for their Simple Choice customers. But they've done something else this past week that has parts of the internet at least raising an eyebrow. They're wondering if T-Mobile's new service is a breach or at least a test of net neutrality. Chee, here's what we got. We know that T-Mobile is offering a new service that will allow their customers to stream video from selected partners without that data counting against their monthly data allotment. They're calling it Binge On. It's an extension of T-Mobile's Music Freedom, which does the same for several music apps. On the video side, their current partners include Netflix, Hulu, HBO Now, and Sling TV. And on the audio side, Spotify and Apple Music, which means if you're using any of those apps, any content that you stream, any data that you download does not count against the data that you bought with whatever plan you might have. Now, before we go any deeper, I just got to ask you, on the surface, this sounds exactly what people were protesting when they pushed for net neutrality, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. It certainly sounds great, and the only thing that I worry about is who's paying all these transit fees. I like it. I'm a T-Mobile customer. It's going to be great for me. I wish Twit TV was on that. I'd love to be able to binge on past episodes of various Twit TV's episodes like Know How. But I don't know. I guess this is going to be a wait and see type of thing.
Right.
We'll see if net neutrality pundits start raising the flags and trying to beat T-Mobile over the head with it.
Curtis, I want to throw this over to you because the way that T-Mobile is explaining it, because they're being very sensitive about this. They're saying it's not what NBC and Comcast were trying to do. This is not a vertical integration. This is not them saying, hey, you know what? if you pay us more, we will speed up your content. Or if you partner with us and pay us money, then we'll make sure that your services are put at the top of the list for our customers, which I think we would all agree that would be a big breach of net neutrality. T-Mobile is saying we're not paying and they're not paying us. The partnership doesn't cost anything. It's not based on whether or not we like your content. It's not even based on whether or not you pay us. It's based entirely on whether or not you have, they're calling it the technical, the equipment requirements to interoperate with the T-Mobile network, which sounds like they're inviting partners to install their gear on the T-Mobile network. They're saying as long as we don't have to pay that transit fee, which again, this would bypass the interconnect, which was such a big problem with net neutrality, that we're not gonna keep our customers from getting to your content any faster. Do you see that as being an actual distinction, or is this a distinction without a difference?
Well, I think it is an actual distinction as long as they genuinely do allow anyone who can come in and place equipment on their side of the interconnect to take part in this, unlimited streaming. The place where it will get really interesting is if people start to do some accumulation. Let's say a consortium of 10 smaller content providers get together and try to put a server inside T-Mobile's network. Will they allow that? If they do, then I'm not seeing a big problem. This is not one where it's a pay-to-play, which was a huge issue with all of the earlier net neutrality issues. It's not one where it should have an outsized impact on the greater internet. So I think that what they may be doing is seeing exactly where the bureaucrats are going to draw the lines. Based on what we've heard so far, I don't see this being outside the current lines, but it does get pretty close to several of them.
Right, and I think this is a good case. I'm glad that this was T-Mobile. If this was another company, if this was AT&T, if this was Verizon, I think people would automatically knee-jerk to, oh no, they're trying to get at it again. They're trying to violate the net neutrality rule that was just put into place. But it being T-Mobile and people knowing T-Mobile to be a little bit disruptive, I think people are willing to sort of sit back and wait just a bit to see where it leads. Chee, it's basically the same question to you. John Legere, CEO of T-Mobile, said in an interview, he said, look, if there was a porn supplier that could meet the technical requirements to be part of this partnership program, which again means that they were able to put their equipment on the inside of T-Mobile's network, that they would be allowed. They don't want to play interconnect politics. They don't want to use the interconnect as a reason for denying or allowing any particular content. If they are true to that, and if they really do mean that anyone who has the equipment and the technical know-how to properly connect to the T-Mobile network can have priority access to their customers without those customers using up their data caps, does this become a non-issue?
I would hope so. I really would. The cross connects, interconnects is huge business, and unfortunately ripe with a lot of politics. And if we start getting people like T-Mobile, or let's call it someone else, say it's another provider, say like Sprint, or a smaller one, say Clearwire. Clearwire rises from the dead and starts doing the same thing. I think we could have some really interesting things, because one of the real big problems with the internet in general is that there is not enough cross connects. So you start getting weird data paths. Like, every once in a while we'll get a problem with, I'm trying to do a transfer in Honolulu and I have to go all the way through Chicago to get to a company. When you have more cross connects and hopefully skilled people, cross connects mean everybody wins. You start keeping the traffic off. You start uncongesting big pipes by having more direct paths. So it could potentially be a big win for the internet community in general. And yeah, I do agree, it's coloring very, very close to some of the lines. But then again, rules are meant to be interpreted. And I think if T-Mobile keeps going with, yeah, we'll connect anyone, I think it's in the end, it's going to be a very, very good thing for all of us in general.
We're having an interesting conversation in the chat room. Web 1077 is pointing out that cell is last mile connectivity. So, I mean, really, as long as it's inside the network, this doesn't involve any interconnect. So, therefore, this should be a non-issue. That's exactly what John Laguerre is saying. But other people are bringing up the point that they're having this issue with Bell Canada and Rogers, which they're trying to do the same thing. But here's the thing: they are offering their own content for free. So in other words, if you use their content, even if it's offered freely, so let's say they don't charge you, let's say it's part of your package to get T-Mobile's video service, would that violate net neutrality? Because now clearly they have an advantage over any of the other partners who may want to come in. Curtis, let me throw that back at you, because this is the important part. This is where we have to get down to the minutia, because at what point does this become unfair competition when T-Mobile says, well, you accepted our partners. Well, how about this? We're going to get rid of our partners. We're going to put them back outside of our network. Well, we're going to offer you all this other video content, and we're going to do it for free.
Well, I think the place where I'm sure the FCC is going to be looking is the extent to which what they're doing either places a burden on customers, in other words, raises prices, or creates a barrier to people becoming, or companies becoming partners. It sounds like what T-Mobile is doing is trying to walk along a fine line where they are offering their customers an advantage, and in doing so, getting themselves an advantage against their competition, while not disadvantaging people who are in other segments of the industry, not disadvantaging content creators, not disadvantaging really any of the interconnects, because they're not burdening them with excess traffic. So if any of those things change, if they started offering their own content, which would disadvantage content producers, if they started trying to favor certain content producers which had a financial arrangement with them, if they did any of those things, then I think the picture would change dramatically and quickly. But as it is, I think they may have found that little tightrope that will let them successfully get across this, and maybe even help customers have a better experience. Imagine that.
Chee, I'm with Curtis here. I think T-Mobile did find that sweet spot. I think even if they had offered it for free, if they were saying that a service they had created or they control would now not count against their cap, people would be upset. In fact, we can take an analog to that. Just 2 weeks ago, Comcast announced that they are looking at what they're going to be doing with caps. We're not going to get into it because I do want to wait for that story to sort of settle down a bit. But one of the pieces of speculation is, as they reinstitute these caps for a lot of the different markets around the country, and as they look at charging customers more for the same amount of data, there's this discussion of, well, would Hulu be free? Would NBC programming that is streamed be free? Because that's also going to be inside the network. It will not be running over an interconnect except for that last mile. Those two situations are really, really close, but do you see them far enough apart where you could clearly say, T-Mobile, you're okay, Comcast, you're not?
Don't know. This is, it's close enough. Like you said, it's close enough that we'd probably actually have to read the end user agreements and how they word it, and how, this story hasn't settled. That's the bottom line. We don't have anybody pushing the rules. Like, for instance, someone like Jenna Jameson hasn't gone and said, hey, I want to put some gear into your facilities. No, I'm not going to touch that one yet, because this story isn't over. The story needs to be pushed a little bit, needs to be tested. And I think I want to see what the FCC does, because Curt's totally right. We are right on the line with T-Mobile. And I think T-Mobile is using this as a test case to find out where the boundaries are.
Well, gentlemen, I think we're going to have to leave it at the boundary, because we do want to move on. We've got a very interesting segment coming up. If you've been dealing with secure enterprise-class file transfers, you're going to want to pay attention because we're bringing in some experts from Niara. We've got Sriram Ramachandran and Vinay Pidathala, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, who will be explaining what it's like to find an exploit that's actually running in the wild. But before we do that, let's go ahead and thank the second sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, let me ask you something. When you have a problem at your enterprise, at your network, who gets called? Who's responsible? What's the duty roster like? Now, when people go on vacation, when people take paid time off, when people go home and sleep, who has to pick up the ball for when your crucial network services go down? Well, if this was the old Wild West, the old IT frontier, it would be whoever's in the office and whoever's unlucky enough to be awake when the email, the page, the phone call comes in. Now, you could go about business that way. You could leave it up to luck. You could leave it up to chance. I mean, that's assuming that your business, your livelihood, your living doesn't account on you being up 24/7. Or you could just use PagerDuty. Now, PagerDuty is the best way to make sure that your issues are handled before they become problems. PagerDuty is an operations performance platform that delivers visibility and actionable intelligence to help increase the uptime of your apps, your servers, your websites, and databases. PagerDuty connects all of your systems into a single view, allowing you to see critical events across all your monitoring tools. It's an essential service if your business needs your software and services to be up. It has over 100 ready-to-use integrations, including Nagios, New Relic, Keynote, AppDynamics, or you could roll your own with PagerDuty's APIs. You could customize it to fit how you and your team work, regardless of the location or size. And that's important because unlike a lot of other tools that force you to conform to the way that they report data, PagerDuty lets you change the tool to fit the way you work. Now, here's how it works. When there's an accident, an incident, PagerDuty will first look through all of your monitoring tools. It will filter and deduplicate the alerts, and then only then will it alert the proper staff. This reduces noise and false alerts and makes sure that only actionable alerts are delivered to your staff. After reducing that noise, PagerDuty checks on-call schedules and personalized alerting preferences to automatically alert the right team and team member. Those alerts are dispatched by automated phone calls, SMS, emails, and push notifications. Now, if an alert is missed, PagerDuty will automatically escalate the issue to another team member until it's responded to. All of this means that you can have incidents that are resolved immediately by the right people on the go, even while you're living your life. Now, PagerDuty is trusted by thousands of companies, including Microsoft, GitHub, Boeing, Nike, and Box. If they can trust their IT plant with PagerDuty, don't you think you can too? Now, here's what we want you to do. We want you to get the right engineer on the right problem at the right time. Visit PagerDuty.com/twit to sign up for a free 14-day trial. And for as little as $19 a month, you can increase your uptime with PagerDuty. That's PagerDuty.com/twit. PagerDuty.com/twit. And we thank PagerDuty for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. We welcome to the show, or should I say, we welcome back to the show, Sriram Ramachandran and Vinay Pidathala. How close was I? Was I even close?
Yeah, that's probably one of the better pronunciations of my last name I've ever, I guess.
I'm going to just try to call you Sriram and Vinay from now on, just to make it a little easier. Now,
Yes.
you are the CEO and the security research at Niara. Could either of you tell me really quickly what Niara is? We had you on the show as a guest from Black Hat not too long ago, but for the folks playing along at home, can you tell us what your company does?
Yes. So Niara is building a security analytics platform that offers 3 top-level propositions. We use machine intelligence to help you automatically detect threats that are on the inside of your network. We also use machine intelligence to amplify and elevate your security operations team. And we do all of this by tying into your existing security systems and enhancing your existing investments.
The last time that you were on the show, it was you were telling us how you were able to look for the signatures of state-sponsored attacks. And it was a very interesting conversation on not just analytics, not just the data that comes in, but how you look for particular signatures and how you look for particular groups of activity. Is that still the focus of your company? Is that the kind of unique, actionable intelligence that you can give to your customers?
Yeah, the way I explain this is if you look at what the bad guys are doing, in the realm of advanced attacks, the bad guys are using human skill, knowledge, and intuition to basically attack you. And so in addition to using all the automated techniques, your rule-based systems, your signatures, and things like that, you also have to be prepared to close the gap with your human capital, namely your security analysts on the inside. Except how do you do that efficiently? There's so much data, there is volume, there's this variety of data. So how can you harness the power of machine intelligence, not just for the automated part, but also as a continuum, be able to elevate and amplify your security operations team? So, and that's kind of what we're focused on.
Right, right. Let's go ahead and talk about this interesting exploit. Now, this is CVE 2015-2857. It's a remote command execution vulnerability in Accellion's secure file transfer application. Now, what is the secure file transfer application by Accellion? I know it's an enterprise class secure file transfer program, but how common is it?
It's pretty common, Father Robert. In fact, if you look at the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, I think it's listed as one of the leaders in secure file transfer services. So yeah, it is pretty popular and it is widely used by enterprises.
Okay. The vulnerability, CVE 2015-2857, it basically allows any attacker to have access to absolutely everything on an unpatched machine. So this is about as bad as it gets. But how did you find out that this was being exploited in the wild?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So we actually in Niara we found an internal server at a customer site beaconing to a suspicious IP in Russia over the IRC protocol. So that was the initial starting point for us detecting this anomalous communication, right? And then since we have packet retention capabilities and we store and process packet data at scale using big data technologies, we were able to look at all of the communications between this internal server and the command and control in Russia. And we noticed that the attackers were issuing a lot of commands over the IRC channel to do various things. One of those things was to download like this archive file, the star.gz file from another CNC in Singapore, which contained the tools and the blueprint to go and exploit other Accellion servers at other organizations. They also downloaded other additional backdoors. So yeah, the first starting point was detecting this anomalous communication, and then we took advantage of the packet forensics and built on top of that, and that's how we discovered the entire attack life cycle, as one may call it.
Wow. Okay, so let me read that back here. You discovered a beacon. So obviously, whoever was attacking the first Accellion server was able to pivot, was able to install a piece of attack software that actually went after other Accellion's secure file transfer applications and other servers. And then from there, you were able to detect that they were running a software to, say, compress certain files inside their stores and send them off to the attack server in Russia.
No, actually, so the compressed file, so to explain this in a little more detail, once the issuers, so the attackers from Russia issued commands to the compromised Accellion servers to go and download an archive file onto the compromised Accellion.
Oh, okay, yes, got
it. That contained tools like, that was very modular in structure, right? So that archive file contained a port scanning tool and the actual exploit. So the attackers would issue commands to actually run the port scanning tool from the compromised Accellion server, and the port scan would just go and scan the internet to find other vulnerable Accellion servers. And once these vulnerable Accellion servers at other organizations were found, the exploit would get launched, and then the remote code execution vulnerability would get exploited, and as a result, a malicious binary would get dropped on the other Accellion server. So we assume that the attackers were trying to control a bunch of these Accellion servers, and since Accellion servers contain a lot of critical information, the motivation was probably to steal all this data, right?
Do you have any hard data that shows that a lot of that data was exfiliated off of the secure file transfer servers?
While we do not have any hard data to say that there was exfiltration going on, at least at the customer side, we were able to, our packet forensics was able to catch the attack early enough, and since we had the entire packet forensics, we were able to sort of give all that information to the customer. But no, we do not have hard data that exfiltration was happening. But knowing the criticality of the server, one has to really take that as a possibility, right, of exfiltration happening, since the attacker has complete access over the compromised system.
Well, I mean, from a logical point of view, if someone did have access to your secure file transfer server, it would be hard to think that they weren't trying to exfil. That would just be silly. So let me ask you this, because this is a question that we would get from members of our audience who might be running their own IT shop, who might be trying to protect their enterprises or their SOHO's data. What should they be looking for in their monitoring tools? So hopefully most of them are logging the traffic that's coming into and out of, or at least logging the connections coming into and out of their network. When should they be alarmed? Because this is one of these nightmare scenarios where you have something in your network that is compromised that can now be pivoted to attack both secure machines inside your network and outside of your network. When you advise your clients, when you advise your customers on how to protect themselves from these sorts of things, what's the traffic that sends up the biggest red flag?
Go ahead, take a crack now. You give an answer and you have more general answer.
Yeah, sure. So at least for this specific attack, I would highly encourage customers who have vulnerable versions of Accellion to look for any anomalous communications from their servers, from the internal servers going out to suspicious IPs over protocols such as IRC. That would be a starting point. They would also want to look for any sort of post-scanning activity, scanning all of internet addresses coming from this single source, coming from this compromised or Accellion server, right? So that would, those are starting points. There are also endpoint sort of indicators that they can look for. They can look for any hidden files on the hard disk, because the attackers are using hidden files to hide the presence of any downloaded files from the internet. So that is also something that they can look at.
I think on a more general note, if it was that easy to answer these questions, and if something can be categorized as black and white, they probably have existing commercial tools out there, either a firewall, an intrusion detection system, some kind of file monitoring software, it can be caught. The issue is that these kinds of sophisticated attacks go well above and beyond that. And so they kind of show up in what I call the gray zone. So usually these things show up as weak blips. And that's what makes it very challenging. So looking at one of them in isolation, here the telltale sign was the communication back to Russia, which we were able to catch. But you're going to have many of these, and part of these are going to be pretty legitimate. So how do you process that? And I think humanly doing it, just sitting down and going through the logs one by one, only works up to a certain scale. So look at deploying solutions that have these kinds of security analytics features in them, and harness the power of machine intelligence to be able to look for anomalies, but also make sure that these tools can link your anomalies to malicious activity in some reliable fashion.
We've actually got a good question from Emily the Strange in the chat room, and she wants to know specifically about how do you find these vulnerabilities, how do you find these exploits, and how do you protect your customers? Let's talk about your customers specifically. So when you are looking for the exploitation of, say, CVE 2015-2857 in the wild, how did you detect it? Was it just random chance that you were able to detect one of these beacons back to the command and control? Or do you have a pretty well-defined network of honeypots and access to interconnection points that allows you to scan traffic?
That's a great question. So I think, again, as I said, if something can be caught through a signature and something is black and white where it can be caught in a completely deterministic fashion, it is being caught and stopped today. So therefore, by definition, some of these things we're talking about here have gotten beyond those existing tools. So what's going to happen is the telltale signals, as it were, that are coming from these kinds of attacks are going to be in the gray zone. So you need ways of being able to kind of find them weak blips as you will. And then, but each of them by itself, if you kind of promote them to an alert and keep sending alerts, you're going to overwhelm the audience. Therefore, you have to have some intelligent way of aggregating this. And so there is a whole host of modules we use. So you said, how do you help your customers? And what we do is we have two kinds of analytics we run, and one of which we call behavioral, and the other we call discrete. And the behavioral analytics basically builds patterns. So a very simple pattern could be that you have some kind of a server on the inside, and the server communicates to the outside. So the software looks at that and builds a profile saying that this server on the inside communicates with all these countries on the outside. There is nothing. It has just learned that. So now when it communicates to a new country, you're able to flag that as sort of a one-off exception. And what you may do is you may actually raise that to a level of an alert. For example, if it's over IRC and it's connecting to a foreign country, it may actually raise to a security level where you may promote that to an alert. If not, you may just remember that. And that's a blip. The next thing you see is you see a lot of malicious activity. Now the same machine is scanning ports on the inside. You have your second blip. You see some kind of suspicious activity. So you're aggregating these things and you're scoring the behavior of this machine continuously. You're building some kind of a risk score that you can utilize when it gets to a certain threshold, essentially promote that to a level of an alert. The second thing is when a human being comes and looks at it, you should be able to paint the picture that gives them instant context, that basically says, I have been watching this machine over a prolonged period of time, and here is everything that I've already observed. So the human usually has a threat hunting kind of a scenario where they're coming in with a thesis, and you're able to give them a view into what is happening in their environment. They simply don't have without applying this sort of machine intelligence.
Right, right, and actually, this is what we talked about at Black Hat in Las Vegas. That exactly. you allow for a machine learn baseline. So it looks at your network and it says, okay, this is what regular activity looks like, and then it starts noticing, I'm starting to see curious behavior from these machines. They did not act like that before. You may have a malware threat on the inside. So once you've got that baseline, and once you've got scores that have been assigned to various events happening inside your network, how do you help your customers with this? I mean, obviously, you're gonna help them if they've got an unpacked Accellion server. But going further, going into the future, as more and more threats emerge, what's the kind of intelligence that you would give to someone who subscribes to Niara?
Yeah, that's great again. So if you just sort of apply only behavioral techniques, the obvious observation I would make here is that finding anomalies is far easier than saying whether the anomaly was actually responsible for some malicious activity. Let me give you an example. Supposing I'm profiling your access against a server. You come in between 9 and 9:30, you work between 5 and 5:30, you do this and that. Last night you came in at midnight and downloaded a file. Is that anomalous? 100%. Is it malicious? Most often not. How are you going to make the difference? So this is where you have to combine the behavioral analytics that you're doing with what we call as discrete analytics. So you're observing other things at a very deep level that may or may not have anything to do with behavior. For example, the same user had downloaded a file that looked off 3 weeks ago. And then their machine had been probing other machines on the network, for 2 days later. And then you saw this activity. And the next day you see a bunch of uploads going to Dropbox, or you see encrypted packets leaving the network. All of this could have happened over a month. And it's the sum total of these things that's happening over a period of time that gives you and puts that anomaly in context. Whereas if you're able to automatically score these over time and then have a continuous risk scoring mechanism, you can certainly elevate it that way. Or what can happen is if a human being came and looked at this, you can paint a picture for them. And the third is most certainly once they've seen that, they want to know what actually happened. And that's where the forensics comes in. So within 2 clicks, without having to pivot out, they should be able to go and look at the actual transactions and satisfy themselves as to whether this was malicious or not. So we're working on, it is not just any one point thing. You can't just say behavioral baselining. You have to put that in the context of a range of techniques that make all of these workable in a real life scenario. If not, you're simply going to contribute to alert white noise with lots and lots of anomalies. The vast majority of this are simply not malicious.
I want to ask one more question from the chat room before I bring in my co-host. We've got Mr. Tweedy in the chat room who he likes the system. So, he thinks it's interesting, and actually, it's a system like this is absolutely necessary in a modern network because you can't overload a human with all the threats and then expect a human to be able to sort through it. So there has to be some sort of machine assistance, some sort of machine learning. But his question is, how do you keep from having false positive? How do you keep from having too many blips that lead to humans ignoring valid threats?
Yeah, so I think, again, The key point to make here is every single time, a machine learning model finds something, an event, you don't simply promote that to an alert. If you keep on doing that, very soon people will just simply lose faith in the system. All we're saying is when the machine learning model runs, there is a certain confidence level on each of these results, and that's kind of the mathematical confidence you have in the model that is run. And there is a severity level. So if the severity level is pretty high, if you think that, hey, I can see that this could be an exfiltration going on, maybe the user says, send that to me all the time, or send that to me if your confidence level is pretty high, okay? However, what happens is even when you don't send an alert, what you're always doing is you're always tagging the data. You're always storing the data. Because these kinds of big data platforms, they can store lots of data and they can remember stuff for you. So, and once you've tagged the data in interesting ways, you can do two things. One is you can aggregate them automatically and then be able to do the risk scoring we talked about. That's one. Secondly, when a human being comes and looks at it, they can very quickly see what you have pre-processed. So for example, let's say that, in the case of Accellion or whatever, let's say that a particular user was compromised. So you are now in the process of doing incident investigation, and the compromise happened 3 months prior. You now want to know, okay, they got compromised. What happened to this user in the week or 2 or month that came after the date of compromise? So imagine a system that is able to, A, aggregate all the data and put that in a correlated form. That's one. But number two, had always remembered and tagged anything that it had found as abnormalities. It had simply remembered it for you. And because at the time when it happened, it did not recognize that there was actually maliciousness. So it never sent you an alert or whatever, but simply remembered it for you. So when you need to go and look at it now, the data has been pre-tagged with machine intelligence. And since you now have the context that this is highly relevant, it has saved you lots and lots and lots of time to be able to go and look at this data. So that's a different perspective. Lastly, to be brief here, the false positives. So we used what we call semi-unsupervised algorithms. So if I actually send you an alert and you say it's a false positive, we take that event and put it back into the loop and say, no, that actually was right. So the algorithm actually learns from that. So I think the false positives are, it's part of the self-learning loop. Those things get fed back into the model and makes the model better.
Fantastic. Okay. I want to bring in my co-hosts here, get them in on this discussion. Curtis, I want to start with you. This is a nightmare scenario. This is one of those things where you hope not to be the IT person who has to explain to your CTO or CIO that the supposedly secure storage area where you kept your sensitive documents, where you told them we could keep safe everything that needs to be kept safe, now has a vulnerability that may have just exfilled all your sensitive data. We talked about this before when we talked about storage. Is this yet another example of why there needs to be sensitive storage that is not connected to the network?
Well, first, I think this is an example of why you keep an undated letter of resignation in your desk drawer, because there are times when that's really the only logical thing to do. But yes, this is the nightmare scenario where you tell the executives that in spite of all the money we spent, in spite of all the precautions we took, in spite of the work that was done by the pen testers and all of our auditors, somebody got ahead of us. And ideally, you can tell them that you found this early. The true nightmare is when you tell them, they got in 11 months ago and we just found out about it last week. That's the critical problem. And that's what a lot of different security folks are saying you can't have. At some point, are you going to have to go to your executives and say, someone got into our system, someone got past our perimeter? Probably so. But what you really want to be able to say is someone got past our perimeter and they were able to get a total of 3 records before we knew what was going on. That's what keeps it from becoming a nightmare, and that's also what keeps people up at night or waking up with a cold sweat. Nightmare is exactly the right word to describe it.
I really like that. Chee, let me throw that over to you. Curtis makes a really good point, which is, look, we're going to get breached. If you're running an organization that has a network, at some point, you're going to get breached. It may be a big breach, it may be a small breach, but at some point, data that you don't want to leak is going to leak. And it's interesting that we don't have a suite of tools that, at the minimum, can tell us exactly what got taken. That's one of the biggest concerns. Look at OPM, where they don't exactly know what left. They kind of know what people had access to, but they don't know what was exfilled. Is this a concern, at least say in your environment, in an academic environment, on a large dynamic campus?
It's a concern to anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're an academic or enterprise. Knowing what happened, if you have a problem, I want to know about it. I don't want to know about it next week. I don't want to know about it next month. I don't want to know about it next year. I want to know about it as soon as possible. Now, my personal rant has been, I did an identity management shootout for InfoWorld almost a decade ago. And one of the things that came up was, gee, why is it so hard for us to be able to correlate physical security and cybersecurity together? And this is actually going to get tossed to our guests. Can your system correlate both? And, the nightmare scenario for me is someone's got a VPN started from out of the country, but at the same exact time, they're doing a card swipe into a secure facility. Separately, they're perfectly good, but together, it's a nightmare scenario.
Sure. So yes. So I think there's two scenarios, one of which you asked about, and the other one I'll kind of cover as an extension. So the physical security really is, if you've got a badge reader that's got some badge logs, you can take the badge logs, parse out the badge logs. And the difficulty there really is you just need to know the badge log, who the user is. Because on the network, we know who the user is. We can tie the packets to Active Directory and we know who the user is. So if you have a mechanism by which you can kind of take your badge reader logs and swipe and say, well, Joe came in here and then, you gave us information. It's a very easy correlation to make. But the second variation of this is you talked about VPN, and this is something we do today. And we call this ground speed violations. So if I find that you have VPN in from San Francisco, 5 minutes later you're VPNing in from pick a spot somewhere else on the planet, Shanghai, and that's a ground speed violation. So we can catch that right off the bat. And there are only some extreme scenarios in which they can possibly be legitimate. Most of the time, it's a terrible thing to have happen. So you can kind of flag that instantly, and that works out of the box.
I like that, ground speed violation. I never thought of describing it that way. Yeah, if I have a user VPNing in from San Francisco and 30 minutes later they're in New York, there's probably something going wrong. At the very minimum, I should probably tell that user, you know what, don't be bouncing off Tor or bouncing off a proxy before you come in through the VPN. Now, let me ask you this, because this is a question that we get from our audience a lot whenever we're talking about vulnerabilities, because there is a patch for this. Accellion did release a patch that does fix the vulnerability. It no longer allows for remote command execution. But you're going to continue to see attacks in the wild because of patch cycle, because not everyone has a good policy on when they patch. Not everyone has a good policy on even when they check if there's a patch. How long is the tail for a 0-day like this? When you have something that gets in the wild, that manages to surprise the security community, that is now dependent upon IT people to patch the local machines, typically how long will it be before we see that command and control infrastructure die?
Well, I mean, on this one, I would have to imagine, for all the reasons you talked about, how serious it is and how sensitive it is and stuff like that, I'd have to imagine that any responsible organization has already taken steps, and it's going to be fairly short. But more generalizing it, so I think there are some scenarios where it's hard. So for example, if you have some kind of an issue with a generic Windows machine and a Windows patch, in a large organization, you have tens of thousands of devices, and IT is busy. So I think repeatedly we see these challenges where people run old versions of software, and they leave them open. So I think it is just a logistical challenge there. With a lot of modern mechanisms and software updates and things like that, it's getting much better. But yes, I mean, this is I'm not sure we can quantify for you with one answer. Hopefully, in this case, I think everyone understands the severity of this issue and steps have been taken all over the place.
All right. Actually, Curtis, I want to ask you the same question, because we have talked about this. I think this was like on episode 92 of Twiat, where we talked about a policy, an IT policy that included a policy on patching. And it wasn't as simple as you get every patch and apply it. There was, you should test it before you deploy it across the enterprise. With something like a 0-day that can affect an enterprise so quickly, should there also be an IT policy about when you disregard previous policies on patching?
There really can't be, because in a complex enterprise environment where you might have 10,000 plus applications, functional modules, pieces of hardware going on, you really need to know what's happening with the interactions. Why do you have to do that? Well, let's think back a few weeks to when United went down with their reservation and passenger manifest system. Let's think about when the New York Stock Exchange went down. Both of those because updates were applied, patches were applied without checking to make sure that they didn't have any repercussions. If you're a very small company and the repercussions of going down for a day aren't important, then fine, go ahead and patch away. But when you've got complex enterprise systems in operation, I think that that's one of those cases where you weigh the possibility of being attacked through the vulnerability. You weigh the consequences of bringing down the whole system, and you make sure that you have things in place so that you are watching the activity within your perimeter very carefully until you can get the patch tested and finally applied.
Chee, I want to give you the last word here. Is there a bit of wisdom that you would like to offer to that young, budding, idealistic IT person who thinks that patches fix everything? When you're looking at the possibility of having your network breached like this, what's the wisdom that you follow?
WSUS.
What WSUS?
Yeah.
Which stands for?
The Windows Server Update Server.
Oh, okay. Good.
There's really no reason, if you're running, especially if you're running a large organization, running a Windows Update Server is a great way to keep a lot of traffic off your WAN. It also gives you a chance to try out a few patches. Just have a junior tech actually applying the patches and then testing to see if your mission critical software works. WSUS is, I think it's free still, and does not require a ton of hardware to run on. And it gives you the ability to check. It's a small piece. There are other updates. Adobe is famous for them, and all kinds of other things. But you got to go for the low-hanging fruit, and a Windows Update Server is a low-hanging fruit.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I want to thank you for being part of this panel. It's a very important vulnerability, especially for those who are working in the enterprise space. Of course, I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Sriram and Vinay for being here from Niara. Could you please tell the folks at home, I mean, this is the second time that you've appeared on This Week in Enterprise Tech. I want them to check out your services. I want them to check out your company. You are a Bay Area company, so at some point we're going to have you up in the studio. We'll bring you up for a nice discussion. But if they wanted to find out what services you offer and a bit more about your machine learning assistance, where can they go? What should they check out?
They can come to our website that's got a wealth of information, including some white papers. It's www.niara, that's NIARA.com. Thank you very much for having us on here for the second time. We greatly appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Yeah. At the very least, we're going to see you at Black Hat DEF CON again, because we're making that a... Actually, will you be at ShmooCon? Are you doing ShmooCon at all?
We don't know yet, so possibly we'll let you know.
Okay, so if you're there and if I'm there, we'll do something in D.C. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
And, of course, I want to thank my co-hosts. I wouldn't have a show without them. I wouldn't want to do a show without them. Let's start with Brian, since we started with Curtis the last time. Chee, did you do the Barnes & Noble Mini Maker Fair thingy, or whatever they call that, the Barnes Fair? Or?
Yes, it's a Mini Maker Fair, and I had a great time. I was demonstrating the Little Bit system, which, teaches basic electronics. But I even had 2-year-olds playing building blocks with them, which is cool. And I had all the way up to high school kids playing with the Arduino building block. It is a spectacular system for kids to learn. And I'm actually going, I actually bought an Arduino Little Bits kit and a few other extras. I'm going to actually sit down and start writing the softwares because I'm really sick and tired of the really junk controller in my hot tub constantly burning out. I'm just going to build a new one based on an Arduino Micro.
Okay, that's now. I have to put a disclaimer here that Little Bits is a sponsor of the Twit TV network, but they've never sponsored a show that Chee has been on. He bought this of his own accord, and it was actually teaching people how to program the 555, correct?
Yeah, it's I teach basic electronics, and the 555 timer chip. Whenever I do that, half of the chips get blown up because the students hook them up wrong.
Of course.
Because they're magnets, you can't hook them up wrong, you can't hook them up backwards. And I'm actually thinking I'm going to use the Little Bits to teach some basic electronics at the college level.
Chee, it's always a pleasure. I do say that next time we probably have to have Little Bits and Harry's as sponsors of This Week in Enterprise Tech to match up with your experience, hopefully. And just remember, don't ever tell us about your legs again.
Aww.
Curtis Franklin, the non-censored member of the Twiat Riot. What's going on over at Information Week Radio?
Well, we got a lot of interesting stuff coming up. Now, this last week, I had to make a trip up to Boston, spent time with the SAP Jam folks, as we heard about in the blip. Next week, I'm going to be heading out to Orlando to FaucetCon to hear all about free and open source software from a bunch of folks who are doing cool stuff with it. We'll also hear a keynote address by Richard Stallman. That's almost always entertaining. So next week, assuming we can get the internet working properly from the hotel, I'll be coming to you live from FaucetCon.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, Chee, Curtis, thank you again. This is my favorite part of the week. I just love chatting with you. We do it even if we didn't have a show. Hopefully at some point we can get together. I know I'm going to see you at in Orlando, right, Curtis? We're going to both be there for Enterprise Connect.
Oh, absolutely. And also at some point need to check and see if you're planning to do CES, because it looks like I'm going to be heading there in a couple of months.
Absolutely. So, yeah, just hit me up. And I don't know if Chee will come, but it would be nice if we could get a trio at some point. Chee?
Always.
Well, I've got some travel money in my budget.
All right, so we may have to do this.
Give me some information on when, what days you're going to be there and so forth, and maybe I can go try and see if I can get there.
That would be fun. A Twiat from CES. Not quite the right environment, but I'm sure we do it up right. Gentlemen, thank you.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Also, thank you to you. That's right, the folks who download and watch us each and every single week. You've used up yet another hour listening to the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe. That's according to 9 out of 10 command and control servers. To thank you, we want to make it easy for you to get all the episodes of This Week in Enterprise Tech that you might want. Just go to our show page at twit.tv/Twiat. That's TWIET. There you'll find not just links for all of our episodes in case you want to download one that you missed, but you'll also find a drop-down menu where you can subscribe to have every episode delivered to your device of choice in your format of choice. Do you want the audio version for your iPhone so you can listen to us on the way to work? Do you want a video version on your tablet so you can watch us during your break? Do you want the high-definition version on your Mac, your PC, your laptop, your desktop so you can watch us in all our HD semi-glory? Well, you can do that too. Again, that's twit.tv/Twiat. Also, don't forget that you can follow me on my Twitter account at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's PadreSJ. It's a great place to go if you want to suggest topics for future episodes and guests for future episodes. In fact, I'd say probably a third of the episodes this year came straight off that Twitter account. If there's some technology you want to see, that's where you tell us that you want to see it. Finally, I want to thank everyone here who makes this show possible. Of course, to Karsten Bondi, my super producer, to Lisa and Leo, who let us do This Week in Enterprise Tech, and to my TD, who once again is Mr. Cranky Hippo Brian Burnett. Brian, I was wondering, what is it that you do here?
I hang out. They started feeding me, and I just haven't left. Basically, I edit some stuff, I TD some stuff. We do a show on Thursday together called Know How. That's a lot of fun, and you can follow me at cranky_hippo if you feel like it.
Yeah, and if you follow him, you will see a lot of pictures of his Doge. He is a corgi.
My boy.
His boy.
He sometimes even makes it into the episode.
See, I knew that would happen. That's what happens. Folks, until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit. And remember, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.